I learned a foreign language completely by myself without studying it in a traditional way, and here's exactly how I did it. Have you ever wondered if you could become fluent in a foreign language without buying a bunch of textbooks or paying for expensive language learning classes? The answer is yes, you absolutely can. And here's how I did it myself. So a little bit about me. I'm a polygot. I am fluent in 3 languages: English, French, and Hungarian. I'm also learning Korean, but I can't really consider myself at any level yet in Korean, but it's on my bucket list of languages to learn. And the foreign language that I have mastered completely by myself is actually English. I'm not actually a native English speaker. I was born and raised in Hungary by parents and grandparents who are 100% Hungarian. Growing up, I didn't have any exposure to foreign languages in my household. I'm not biracial. I didn't go to international school, but for some reason, ever since I was little, I always wanted to be fluent in English. You see, growing up in post-Soviet Hungary, we didn't have a lot of access to Western media, such as TV series or films or even music, mostly because we always had to wait a lot for Hungarian TV channels to translate American TV shows or English music shows. So every time I really liked a TV series that was from the United States or England or Australia, I always had to wait a lot for translations. And even when I was very young, I didn't like to wait. I'm not a very patient person, so I just figured that if I was able to learn English completely by myself, I could just watch all my favorite American TV shows and movies without having to wait for the translation. And so here are the exact steps that I took in order to become fluent in English very, very fast at a very young age. And these are the steps that you can take exactly yourself if you want to become fluent in a foreign language in a short period of time. Let's get into it. Have a clear goal in mind. So before we even get into what steps you have to take and how to become fluent in foreign language, I want you to choose your why. You see, my biggest motivation for learning English was to be able to watch my favorite TV series. But why do you even need a strong reason to learn a foreign language? Here's the thing. Contrary to the traditional way of learning languages, such as taking classes with other people or signing up for an online course where you have a teacher, learning languages by yourself at home is very lonely, very hard, and you need to stay very disciplined and very motivated in order to be able to really get to fluency in your target language. This journey can be really hard if you don't have a clear why, if you don't have a clear reason to why you wanna even get into studying this foreign language. Is it just for fun? Is it because you wanna maybe relocate? Is it because you're super in love with the country's culture and language and maybe you wanna live there someday? Get clear on why you wanna start this whole language learning journey, and I would even write down my reason and just put it somewhere on the wall, on the mirror, or on the fridge where I can see it every single day. I would also take a piece of paper and would write down a specific goal that I want to achieve with learning this foreign language by myself. Maybe do you want to get to a conversational level in Japanese, or do you want to get a B2 language certificate in German? Have a very specific goal in mind and write it down next to your big why. So you see, when I was learning English by myself, the first thing I did before I even started buying books or learning the grammar was to expose myself to the language for 1 month. So exposing myself to English meant things like listening to at least 4 or 5 English songs every single day, which is not that hard, to be honest. There are many great English, American, Australian artists out there today, but you can also do this if you're not learning English, but for example you're learning Japanese or you're learning German or you're learning French. There are many great artists in every single nation that you can listen to. Expose yourself to at least 4 or 5 English, Japanese, German, whatever language you're currently learning, songs per day, and at the same time while you're listening to the songs, also read along the lyrics of the song to get familiar with how the words sound, how people pronounce things. I did this when I was learning English, and I would listen to these people and I would just read along the lyrics. I would try to pronounce things by myself. I wouldn't try to sing along sometimes. Do that if you want to. And this is a great way to familiarize yourself with how the language sounds before you even start learning the grammar or building your vocabulary. So the second thing that I did to expose myself to English when I was learning English was to watch at least an hour-long TV series, movies, or YouTube videos. Again, our objective here is to get familiar with how the language sounds, with how people are talking, get used to the pronunciation. So get a general sense of how the language sounds by watching at least an hour long of TV shows, YouTube videos, TikToks in your target language. Of course, if you cannot do 1 hour, you can just do 30 minutes. You can just do 10 minutes. Very important step. The third thing that I did when I was immersing myself in the world of English was exchanging with native speakers using pen friend websites. Having pen friends and being able to exchange with native speakers in your target language is incredibly useful in order to be able to have real conversations with real native speakers and just learning the everyday language that is used by actual native speakers. I remember back in like 2010, these like pen friend websites were like super popular and a lot of people were using them specifically to like exchange languages and to learn a specific language. Of course, today there are a lot more ways to exchange with native speakers. There are apps for this, there are websites for this, there's social media. Some of the websites that I know and recommend are HelloTalk, Tandem, Conversation Exchange. So I would recommend you to do a benchmark, look up the benefits of each of these websites and decide on one that you're gonna be using to exchange with native speakers in your target language. Build your vocabulary. So after you've been exposing yourself to your target language for at least a month, the next step is to build your vocabulary. So the way I personally started building my vocabulary when I was learning English was by watching my favorite TV shows in English, the same way that I just explained to you, and at the same time I would take out a notebook and I would note down every single word that I didn't know. So I would watch these American TV series with English subtitles, and the moment I didn't understand the word, I would note it down, and then later in the day, usually before going to sleep, I would take out my notebook and I would start revising the words that I noted down before. Nowadays, of course, in 2023, there are much more easier ways to learn new words and build your vocabulary. You can just use a language learning app such as Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, and HelloTalk. Again, do your benchmark, download all of them and then see which one you like the most. But they are a great way to learn new words. When it comes to how many new words you should learn per day, I would say anything from 20 new words to 30 new words. I think that is pretty reasonable, especially if you are learning from context. So learning words from context just means that you're learning new words by understanding and interpreting words within the context of a sentence or a phrase, for example. Like for example, when you hear a new word in a TV series or when you hear someone say something on the street, that would be learning words from context. Not learning words from context would be something like memorizing random words, random isolated words, and what they mean from a dictionary, just like that, which is a method that a lot of teachers teach in school, for example. But yeah, I much prefer building my vocabulary from context because I feel like when you're just memorizing random words without really being able to associate them with something, it's really hard to remember them correctly. Now that you have a vocabulary of, I would say, at least from 50 to 100 basic words, I would now start moving on with learning the basic grammar and also a couple of tenses. I know that there are people who recommend learning the basic words at the same time that you're also learning the basic grammar. I personally don't like to do that. I much prefer learning the basic words in advance of a foreign language and then moving on to the grammar. Why? First of all, because learning two things at the same time is very hard. When you have to learn the new words while also learning the basic grammar at the same time, it can be really hard and very demotivating sometimes. I much prefer personally to learn the basic words at first and then move on with the grammar because it's kind of like a confidence boost when you're going through the grammar examples and you are already familiar with all of the words, all of the basic expressions, all of the basic greetings and whatnot. Now let's talk grammar. So while I would love to tell you that you can master a foreign language just by watching TV series and by just using a couple of language learning apps here and there, the ugly truth is that when it comes to mastering the structure of the language, you really need something that is very organized and that is very structured and that also gives you exercises that you can practice with. Textbooks are perfect for that. They're super organized. I mean, most of them. And they also give you enough space to practice and to revise what you learned. And I don't want to go too much into detail on which textbook you need to get for your target language because first of all, I don't know which language you're trying to learn, and also because I don't know what level you're currently on. So if you're someone who is looking for textbooks in the target language that you want to learn, I would recommend you to look up reviews on Google and Amazon and also watch a couple of videos from YouTubers who are already fluent in the language that you're trying to learn and who have already mastered this language that you really want to learn. Now, if you're someone who is currently trying to learn French, I can help you with that actually because I am fluent in French. So if you're curious about the best textbooks to learn French, I do have a list of my favorite textbooks in French in my description box down below, so make sure to check that out. And if you're someone who is also really curious about not only the French language but also French culture and living in France, and you might want to relocate to France, I do have a monthly newsletter where I share free information about life in France and living in France as an expat. You can subscribe to my monthly newsletter down in the description box as well. Self-promo over. Sign up for an online course. So once you already have the basic vocabulary and you have also mastered the basic grammar, I would now stop learning the language on my own completely. Wait, what? Yes, you heard me right. And once I got to an A2 or a B1 level by myself, I would just now honestly stop learning the language by myself. And here is why. Learning a foreign language on your own is great for many reasons. It gives you freedom of your time. You can learn whenever you want. It also gives you the freedom to choose the materials from which you want to study from. But at the same time, I also think that learning a language on your own has its own limits. I think it's especially true when you get to that A2, B1 level. Getting to B2 and C1 from A2 and B1 in a foreign language is very hard. I'm not sure why it is, but I think that there is a huge gap there in knowledge and practice that is really hard to close on your own. And you know, most people, when they hit a wall, just give up. I don't want you to be one of them. So if you feel like you hit a wall on how much you can learn on your own, honestly, sign up for an online course, take classes, even pay for a teacher. I think it's just so much easier sometimes to pay for someone or pay for a course that will organize and structure your classes and materials. And the only thing you have to do is just to show up for class, learn the materials, and take the exams. Especially if you're someone who is super busy with other things, you have kids, you have dogs, you have a job. Sometimes it's a much better and smarter way to progress in a foreign language than doing everything on your own. If you're somebody who's already at a good A2, B1 level, if you manage to get there on your own, but you feel like you're not really progressing, sign up for something, get help, delegate things to other people, let other people do all the planning. Don't do everything on your own. If you feel like you cannot do it anymore on your own, but you really want to progress in a foreign language, just sign up for something. Sign up for a language proficiency test. One of the best ways to really commit yourself to learning a foreign language and to really take it seriously is to do something that has a lot of stakes. Signing up for a language proficiency test is great for many reasons, but I think that one of the reasons why it's such a good idea is because this will serve you as kind of like a stressful motivation to keep you pushing and to not give up on the language you want to learn. You see, when we don't have regular classes, when we don't have assignments, when we don't have a teacher who is kind of responsible for our progress, I think it's really easy to fall off, and I think it's really easy to give up because there's nothing at stake. So if you know that you're someone who has a tendency to give up easily when things get hard, and if you struggle with self-discipline, sign up for a language proficiency test. Another thing is that when you have already paid for the test, you will take the test just because you paid for it. Even if you don't study and you don't keep up, you will want to keep up and study because there is already something that you paid for. I actually recommend you to sign up for a test that is on the level that you think you currently are. For example, if you think that you are now at an A2 level in Spanish, sign up for an A2 Spanish exam. Or if you've been learning French for the past year and you think that you're now at a B1 level, sign up for a B1 French proficiency test. If you want to play it safe, you can take an online language proficiency test before you actually sign up for the real thing and pay a bunch of money. But I think it's a good thing to have that as a motivation, to have something serious that you will have to do at the end of your language learning journey. And I want to share an anecdote with you, and I want to tell you what happened with me learning English by myself and all of that stuff. So from 2010, I kept learning English by myself the same way I just told you. I was listening to podcasts in English literally all day long. 24/7, I was either listening to something in English, watching something in English, writing something in English. I even created a YouTube channel where I have to talk in English. But for some reason, I was always very scared to actually take a language proficiency test. And for years, I avoided it. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't really have to do it anyways because I was in France. I was doing my studies in French at a French university. So I was like, I don't really need to do this. Up until 2020, when I applied to a Korean university exchange program. In the framework of my Korean university exchange program, I was also obligated to do an English proficiency test. So in 2020, I was like, okay, now I have no choice. I've been avoiding this for the past 10 years. I have to do this if I want to go to Korea. So I signed up for the IELTS English proficiency test. I had no idea how to prepare for it. I didn't want to take classes because I was just like, I already have a good level in English. I'm sure I can ace it somehow on my own. So I didn't take classes to prepare for the test. I was just preparing by myself by looking at like previous IELTS exams online, and I kid you not, the whole time that I was taking the exam, I was literally thinking to myself, I can't believe that I was so scared of taking this exam because it's just so easy. I actually ended up obtaining a C1 level at my IELTS exam, and then 2 years later, in 2022, I had to do another English exam for my French university, and this time it was the language cert English exam, I believe, and this time I obtained a C2 native English speaker level, which I don't necessarily agree with completely because, as you can pretty much hear, I still make a bunch of mistakes in English. My English is still not perfect, but I guess the moral of this story is that when you're learning a language by yourself, it's really important to quantify your journey, to measure your progress, and to have a goal in mind. I could have taken that English exam so much earlier, I think, and I still would have had the C1, C2 level. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found it helpful. And if you're someone who is curious about how I am still learning French by myself every single day, make sure to watch this video next.